Welcome to the Responsible Marketing Podcast, conversations about marketing, sustainability, and how we can all help in becoming more responsible organisations. I'm Jo, a marketing strategist and consultant with a career spanning corporate, small medium business and self-employment, incorporating marketing and commercial skills in various guises, and now flying the flag for a more sustainable and kind future for all. This time I'm joined by Richard Linsley, head teacher at Priors Mill C.V. Primary School based in Billingham in the northeast of England. Richard has been in education for over 25 years, moving from teaching to leadership roles. And just before this recording, I was lucky enough to take part in Careers Week at the school, talking with Year 4 pupils about their aspirations for the future, as well as the pros and cons of being employed versus self-employment, and what to consider when setting up your own business. The interest and enthusiasm of the children was a huge reflection on the school itself and what the staff, teachers and trust look to strive for every day. Richard and I talk about the fairytale story of how he embarked on his career in education, how relationships, social values and community are vital in delivering and evolving to meet the needs of the children and their families, courageous advocacy and the School of Sanctuary pledge, pressures within the education sector and how the support, collaboration and alignment of all stakeholders is a huge advantage, and how sustainable practices are becoming more day-to-day as a result of the children's influence as well as the business management side of the school sites. Let's dive straight in. Hi and welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted this afternoon to have Mr. Linsley, Richard.
Good morning.
Can I call you Richard?
You can.
Fabulous. From Priors Mill Primary School, based in the northeast of England. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's the first time I've had someone from the education sector on the podcast.
Oh, no pressure then.
Yeah, I know.
No pressure.
So, do you want to just introduce yourself and a bit of background about your career and how you found yourself as head teacher of Priors Mill?
Okay, so my name's Richard Linsley. I've been in education now for 26 years, I think, which is a long time. So I started off as a NQT in the northeast in a small village in West Auckland, and then moved through really, worked in Darlington, worked in County Durham. I found myself as a deputy head in Newton Aycliffe.
Was that quite early on in your career?
That was about 10 years in, I think.
Oh wow,
so
that's quite quick then.
Tried to sort of accelerate through. Not that, I mean, I love teaching. The whole reason why I'm still head teacher is because teaching, I think, is my bread and butter. That's the best bit about being in education. Head teacher, things change slightly, and I think that became evident when I got my first headship in Northallerton. I was there for 7 years, did some executive head roles, worked for the local authority, and then a fantastic opportunity to work at Priors Mill in Billingham arose. So now head teacher here and been here just under 18 months.
Very good. Did you always want to be a teacher? Did you always want to go into teaching? Was that your thing or?
No, it wasn't my thing.
Okay.
I think that when I was at university, met a very inspirational student who always wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
That inspirational student really is now my wife. She always wanted to be a teacher, and when I left university first time, I was thinking, what should I do? She was very clear that she wanted to be a teacher, so I thought, I'll go and see what it's about, and just sort of got bitten by the bug, and then here we are 26 years later. So
sounds like a little fairy tale story. It's great. I love it.
So
and your wife's an exceptional teacher as
and
well.
she is a fantastic teacher and much better probably at it than I ever was, but it's funny how I just got the bug really, but up until that point I'd not considered it an optician. I think I wanted to be looking at lots of different things. The police, I had a police interview lined up, but got bitten by the teaching bug and never looked back.
Fabulous. And what made you then, obviously you said about you wanted to accelerate your career kind of like through the ranks as it were, because a lot of teaching staff that I know, they like the teaching side. You just said you love the teaching side, but becoming a head teacher or that kind of like leadership team sometimes takes you out of the teaching side of it, doesn't it? So
it does, and I think
how's that transition been for you, and what made you want to kind of progress?
Difficult because you go into teaching because you love being with the children, and when I started, that was the main priority. I think being exposed when I had my very first job to leading PE was then an opportunity to sort of take on some responsibility, work with other colleagues, meet other people. And from that point, that sort of lit a bit of a leadership flame, I think. So as much as I enjoyed the teaching, I also enjoyed the added responsibility that came with it. But it is difficult as you go through your career. It's strange in that you sometimes get drawn away from the very thing that attracted you to teaching. So now, as head teacher, one of the greatest things is stepping out of the office and going into the classroom and reminding yourself of what brought you there in the first place.
Well, we've just had a fabulous kind of hour in the classroom, haven't we? And the kids,
totally.
I mean, I know it's not a huge school anyway, but you know, they clearly are very partial to you. You know, they're very respectful, and they're very, you know, very excited to have you in the classroom and things as well, which I think is a great thing, because obviously you're in the school as well as obviously having the leadership side. So, so I had to obviously look at Priors Mill's website. And it states the school serves the local community, which I love. So, as you know, being in marketing, but looking at sustainability and things like that, a lot of it is about social values and community.
Absolutely.
So I love the fact that you're stating you serve the local community. It's quite a big statement. So it's obviously a very, very big value, you know, really considerable value within the school, and is at the heart of the school, like it should do. Oh, should be, sorry. But is it quite difficult to fill those shoes? Because, you know, what community means and what community draws on or requests or needs is quite difficult sometimes to fathom out. So how does a school kind of assess what's required, and how do you kind of answer that statement that you make?
I think it's relationships, and relationships in education are huge, but relationships with members of our community are huge. And for me, I see school as an essential part of any community, but here at Priors Mill, really being central, understanding our families, our children, their needs. And I think that is the main focus. We don't always get it right. We try to. And I think that's just something that we constantly evolves through school. And that kind of keeps us coming to work every day, is how can we be better? How can we kind of provide the guidance and support that families need? I wasn't here during COVID, but I know the school played a key role in trying to support families during COVID, and I think from then we've still seen some of the hangover that children are facing and families are facing. So we have a very busy parent welfare officer who is a first point of contact and supports really members of our community, points them in the direction of things that they need for healthcare, for mental health support, for even things such as food banks, for lots of things in the community that our families need support with. And ultimately we have very much an open door policy. So we want our families to come in and tell us what things they need, what things they would like.
Facing and things, and also the good stories, I guess, as well. So when you've obviously created positive impact, which you will do as a kids leave
It's
school,
fantastic to hear about things where children have been in school and then gone. We have courageous advocacy, we call it in school. So courageous advocates, where children will take something that they're passionate about and then go and do something about it. So we had a child the other day who was in the library with the parents, had seen a poster from the Dogs Trust. So they then came back into school, wrote me a letter, please can we have the Dogs Trust in, we'd like to know more about it. So we organised a meeting and then had workshops. So community and bringing it in school and building on children's beliefs, something we're really passionate about.
And I guess that then kind of cements the fact that the kids believe, you know, if they can ask for something, that you'll do your best to get it. But also the parents, you know, and the parents will be great kind of spokespeople for the school going forward, referring them onwards to other parents perhaps, or whatever as well. So I guess, you know, it's a good way for you to kind of like, I know you don't do it for a PR factor, but you know, it's good PR for the school, isn't it, I guess, to make sure. I don't know, what competition do you have around here for primary school? Do you have quite a large catchment area for the school?
Billingham, a huge area where we are, so lots of schools, lots of competition, lots of sort of parental choice. And for us it's about making sure that certainly as a Church of England school, we build on our values. We're part of the Melrose Learning Trust, so our values align. So we're very keen that kind of the children that come in experience the full sort of Priors Mill offer, of which our morals and our values are a key part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting you just brought up the faith part of the school. So obviously it is a Christian school, or CVN school. I'm not sure what you say these days, Christian or CV, but Do you ever find that's a barrier at all? Because obviously there's definitely movement, I think, just in general, maybe away from faiths, also different faiths and everything else. Do you ever find that a barrier, that people won't come to the school because it is a faith-led school?
I think that I've found the opposite, to be honest,
Oh,
at the moment.
okay.
I think that, for me, this is my first headship in a Church of England school.
Yeah.
So I've worked in Methodist schools and had experience of Catholic provision. Mm-hmm. However, being a Church of England head, I think is something that is a little bit special.
Yeah.
And certainly, I think parents appreciate, again, our values, and we have a set of priors principles that are really at the heart of the school that the children follow and parents are aware of. I don't think that we try and indoctrinate our children here or try and force Christian worship on them. I think we expose them to the values and beliefs that Christians follow, but we also expose them to lots of other religions, make sure that they get a broad and balanced sort of education religiously. I think it's more the principles and the values that we hold and the expectations we have.
Yeah, and I guess, overall respect for people, that's not necessarily a faith-led, specific faith, is it? It is a general thing. So, yeah, and you mentioned about values, and there are some amazing values that you've got embedded in the school. So I'd like to talk a bit more about that. Because again, social impact is very important, and also kind of like brand reputation as the school. So things like inclusivity. So what does that actually mean, kind of within the boundaries of the school, really? Inclusivity.
It means that everyone is welcome, and we've done lots in school to sort of broaden and strengthen teacher knowledge, skill set, to make sure that the wide variety of children that we attract to school and their bespoke needs are met. So we would like to think ourselves as a welcoming school with an open door policy for everyone, for that be parents or children. But really, no one should be disadvantaged coming to Priors Mill. Everyone should be given equal opportunity, and we're very keen to push sort of protected characteristics we talk about in education and making sure that no one is disadvantaged. Our Priors promise, which we refer to when we have our worship, makes sure that children know that equality is really important and fairness, and that their beliefs and their strengths and sometimes their areas of development are all there to be respected and move on, really. Yeah,
and I love the fact that you talk about nurturing God's given gifts. So although that does have a kind of a faith line through that, really, but it is amazing to, we've just been talking to the kids about their uniqueness, like what makes them different. So therefore, if they were to go into business, what would make their business different? And I think that's an amazing thing to kind of like nurture, like finding what your gift is, what your purpose is, really, which even into adulthood, a lot of people don't really get. But to be opening their minds to that already, I think is a fabulous thing to do.
I think the proudest thing for me as head teacher is when our children are either on trips or go on visits or then move on to secondary schools, further education, and people come, we can tell it's a Priors Mill child. Because of the values that they have, because of how they carry themselves and their attitude. So that is the thing that we aspire to give them that confidence and also that expectation. So that is something that we've worked very hard to. I know we might talk about School of Sanctuary later, but that's another sort of aspect of that.
Well, we could talk about that now if you want. So the School of Sanctuary. So it's a pledge, isn't it? So
it is.
How new is that, and just tell me about it.
School of Sanctuary is very new to Priors Mill. Not something I can really take credit for. I started School of Sanctuary in my previous headship to support with the number of Afghan refugees that were coming into Northallerton. So we'd had a number that came into school. And School of Sanctuary was a way of making them feel welcome, exploring their culture, embedding that into school. We are predominantly white British at the moment, so our cohort don't have the exposure to the mixture of cultures and different ethnicities that they might have, say, at the school in inner city Manchester. School of Sanctuary aims to break down those barriers, aims to make sure that the school is a welcoming place. So we've now had children from different parts of the world who've come. The School of Sanctuary arrived with no English, and School of Sanctuary was something that two of our members of staff took on and really embedded an HLTA and a teacher working together to put a platform in place where that children who come have now got a bespoke programme where they can follow through language, they can follow through culture, they can follow through family support to help embed them into the school and into the wider community. And it's been really successful.
And again, it kind of, like you say, widens the eyes of the other kids that are here as well to, that's an amazing introduction to different cultures and and just ways of life and backgrounds in different countries and everything else, isn't it? So does that mean then ultimately kind of like doing this School of Sanctuary pledge, does that mean you're becoming more responsible then, do you think? Is that how you
think
consider?
so. That's a commitment to us in our school, that we are open and inclusive, and we'll take children from any background, from any ethnicity, from any culture, and they're welcome in our school.
Yeah, it's quite a phenomenal thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't think there are many schools that would say no. Or certainly say no on the outside. But yeah, it does present its problems, doesn't it? Because obviously you need staff support to help that child perhaps that's coming with no English, and you know, especially if they have, I guess, extra educational needs or anything like that. That is extra. How do you manage that? How do you manage the extra kind of like pressure on your resources?
I think the pressure, and education is really in a sort of challenging moment where certainly pressure financially sometimes maybe influences leaders to take decisions that maybe they're not sort of morally comfortable with. I think by being a School of Sanctuary, we commit that we've opened ourselves to that we will take, and certainly if we have space, we will do our best for any child. It's not without challenge though. So we've had to fund time for staff to get training, time for staff to get the best sort of training to understand, learn different languages. I'm really blessed that staff have taken a lot of that responsibility on themselves and been really keen to kind of learn and how to support the children in their class. So a lot of credit to teachers and staff involved who've been at the start of the School of Sanctuary journey, and the rest of the school have then kind of been inspired, and there's a pathway now which we've seen set when we've had children from other sort of cultures joining us. Yeah,
and I guess that kind of comes back to the values, and the values, the fact that they run through the staff, not just the school as a persona, kind of like they go through the staff as well.
Very much so.
So that tends, I guess that's then a cultural thing within school and with the leadership team, and that interaction between governors, leadership, teaching staff and children. So what are the challenges there from that? Have you had any challenges, or have you just been lucky enough to have people that have come in and just all embrace this type of thing?
I think at the moment it's kind of a fear of the unknown. It's adding to workload. So there is challenge from staff, and it's making sure that as a school we're aligned with the governing body, who are also aligned with the trust and the board of directors, and there's a clear pathway through. I think one of the strengths of our trust is that they allow the school to be the school, and they build on the strengths of the school. The governors are also very supportive. They realise that we've got a role to play in the community. We want to be that school, and staff so far have engaged. I guess the challenge for me is to make sure that that's all in balance, and that we're making sure that if they're taking time, we're trying to give it back, or we're trying to look out and support them as best we can.
But I guess going back to your introduction, actually, when you're talking about teaching and that kind of caring role, then I guess a lot of the people, a lot of the staff, I'm assuming this, a lot of the staff are here to help the children because they're teachers in the first place. So actually that carer's role is already there, and so therefore if they can see ways to benefit the children, especially if they've come from perhaps less privileged backgrounds or whatever, then they will probably naturally have it in them to want to do that anyway.
Yeah, so I think that's very lucky with the teaching workforce that we have. That's their sort of priority, really.
Yeah, it's great. So going back to the kind of responsibility side, so quite often when I'm talking to businesses about responsibility, it's about sustainability and it's about kind of carbon emissions and how they deal with that kind of stuff. Have you had to deal with anything like that yet? Is it on your radar? It kind of like more regulatory type stuff?
Yeah, very much so. So I think a lot of it is starting to come through from the children who are very keen about what happens with our recycling, what happens with lights on, what happens with kind of water usage. So we're seeing a lot of sort of questions, challenge, I would say, is fair to say, from our children about what happens and why are we doing this. There is a big push at the moment and a big focus on how we can be better. Certainly energy-wise, like everyone at home, we would love to save money on our energy bills.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a little band of eco warriors who are trying to make sure that lights are knocked off, making sure that we can look at ways in how we can save our recycling. We've started with the local authority looking at food recycling now. So it's a huge part of the agenda. Again, it's another aspect of the job that you don't really consider when you come into teaching.
You weren't expecting to deal with that as well.
No, I have to deal with it, but even things such as LED lights and the savings we can make. So it is becoming more and more a sort of valuable sort of asset, really, to promote children and staff to think about things.
Yeah, because again, like going back to a kind of PR point of view, if the kids are going home saying, "Oh, you won't believe what happened today," I don't know, something to do with the recycling truck turned up or whatever, you know, there's that kind of PR aspect that goes out. People just talking about it and what a great job you're doing. And, you know, that's again going to like have your waiting list for kids to come on board.
I hope so.
Boosted,
I think more than, and that'd be very nice. But I think for us, it's making sure, again, it comes back to those values and what we want our children to know.
Okay.
And you talked a little bit this morning about kind of things being sort of ethical and making sure that things are right. And that's really important to us. The challenge is that financially, can we get everything to match? So sometimes we have to compromise on principles and on what we want, but I think children are amazing drivers and sometimes have a more powerful voice than maybe some adults. So
I agree.
that's the advantage.
And there's no kind of funding out there or anything for this kind of like changing lights, for example?
I think it's all lights that the Trust are looking into. I'm hoping that we're near the top of the list when it comes to that. So there is some funding available. I think it's an area at the moment we have to be very careful. Lots of people can offer lots of things. Yeah. It's the long-term sustainability of it and what it means.
Definitely, absolutely. So, we've just talked about the kids actually driving that type of thing. So do you find that the values that you hold in school, which are really strong anyway, do they trickle through the staff and the kids when they go home then? So they take all, that's, I guess, the intention. That
is the intention, yeah. I'd like to think so, and I'd like to think it's difficult, and lots of choices and lots of challenges in modern day life to make people question, are those the best values? And we were talking this week about temptation and how difficult it is sometimes to make the right choice, but that our priors promise values are sort of there as guidance to sort of make the right choice. And we would love it when children go home and speak to parents about things that they've been doing in school, choices they've had to make, and get that sort of feedback from parents. And hopefully they will notice themselves that in the choices that the children are making, the impact of school on them.
Yeah, it was really interesting today because we had a real mix of, you know, kids wanting to be professional footballers, I guess, for a bit of kudos and the money and all the lifestyle that goes with that, but also some kids who, you know, want to start charity shops or they want to, you know, do a dog home or something like that, you know. So there's some really interesting kind of parallels there with, you know, balancing out kind of like the very, I suppose, magnet type monetary lifestyle and, you know, the glitz and glamour versus actually some really caring souls in there. So there's definitely some elements coming through that already, and you've got kids that will embrace that for sure. So do you see then the values kind of drive the partnership between the governors? You said they kind of like, obviously you've got some I can't think of the words, but some advocate that comes down from the trust.
Yes.
And that, I guess, stems from, government policy or whatever else, but that doesn't necessarily rule the values that you've put in place.
No.
So that's kind of like this is what we want the school to adhere to or represent or whatever on a top line basis. So where do you actually develop the values from? Like what's happened there? How does that, and do they ever change? Because, you know, in theory, values should never change, but life changes, and so therefore, and maybe what the school, like we talk about community and involvement with that, does that ever change?
I think that certainly at Priors Mill, being a Church of England school, our sort of values are rooted in the parable of the mustard seed initially. So that doesn't change. That was done after consultation prior to my arrival with parents, with members of the diocese, with children, with staff, to try and find something that would sort of represent the school and what it wants to be. And the parable of the mustard seed, with a small seed growing into a huge tree with branches that provide support and strength, really fits in, I think, with the ethos that staff felt the school provides. That then also fits very nicely with when we were looking at joining Multi Academy Trust, which trust had that sort of similar ethos. The Melrose Learning Trust has its growing in life in all its fullness, and that sort of sense of growth and connection really helped sort of draw us towards Melrose and made it a sensible choice. So there's a lot of sort of parity with values to start with, and that's something that, regardless of government or trust sort of input, won't change, because that's very much bespoke to the school, I think, and makes it a strength. The governors are there just to make sure that those sorts of values are really upheld, and they see it in the actions of decisions that I make and of what staff do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't realise you had a choice of trust then. You weren't, it's not kind of imposed on you.
No.
So it's almost like a bit of an interview panel as to various trusts and how that aligns with what you want to do. But that's an amazing thing then, isn't it? Because that it doesn't mean that you have to kind of like almost shoehorn yourself into somewhat like something else.
No.
You can actually be what you want to be, and it's aligned with another supportive body.
And I think unless you're sort of in that process, sometimes it's easy to think or read the sound bites that you are sort of forced into a trust direction. But it was very much like a sort of open interview where we, as a Church of England school, we were recommended a number of trusts, which then governors went and visited, had interviews, presentations, narrowed it down, and then made a decision in the final
fabulous. So so at least you know you're supported from the start, isn't
absolutely,
it? Yeah,
absolutely.
And like you say, you can carry on actually delivering the values that you want to deliver as a school, as opposed to having to eke in someone else's requirements.
And I think sort of, unlike other trusts, we've been given a lot of freedom to be ourselves as a school, and the trust is there to enhance what we do rather than dictate, and I think that's a key
well, they clearly
difference.
see the result you give to the community and the kids that leave the school, and feed into the other schools, So how do you use all this in your communication? Like, obviously you've got a really good website, which I've had a look at, and everything else, and there's lots of things about your values and how the school represents itself and the children, everything else, and the staff as well. But what else can you use to kind of like tell people how great the school is and really get those kind of like cues of parents wanting to bring the kids here?
I think for us, certainly, to be fair, we've probably not really thought about it in that much depth previously. I think in our area now we're experiencing sort of low birth rates, or things are becoming, I would say, competitive really between schools in a sort of friendly sense, and not that we're trying to pinch parents, but it's really important how we promote ourselves, and I think that's an aspect of school that we've not really considered before. So we do that in our own sort of communication. We have Facebook, we have the website, but we've never really used it where we've been actively trying to use it as a marketing tool, so to speak. And I think that's something maybe that we could be better at, and that it's something to maybe explore how we can best keep that and keep an online sort of presence, as well as ultimately I think the best thing about the school is having an open door policy and encouraging people to come and have a look. And we try and
it's been an amazing school to visit.
And we try and make sure that there's opportunities for parents to visit, whether that's to come in and see children lead a worship, whether it's stay and play mornings, whether it's kind of workshops. So every term we have opportunities for parents to come in the hope that they will then spread word of mouth and make sure that that's the case. And we've been lucky so far that has been the case.
I don't think lucky. I think you've made a very good,
I think staff work hard, and I think that's a result of their sort of hard work to make sure that we engage with parents and try and help wherever we can.
And I think only putting my marketing hat on, obviously, because you're not going to do that. Some local press would go down well, because we just talked about you getting perhaps the Dogs Trust in or something like that. That's a great piece of PR, and kids will go home obviously and talk about it and tell other people, but the wider network definitely needs to know about it. So definitely. And you don't find that, obviously, it could be quite sensitive communicating a school and with the kids, and protection over their privacy and all that kind of stuff. So do you find that's restrictive because it's education? Do you find, whereas as a business I can really put what I like out there
I think so, and I don't think it's sort of, I don't know, maybe it's education, but we're not normally that good at shouting about how good we are.
Very humble.
We tend to look inwards and think that needs to be better. Already I'm kind of thinking, whoa, maybe Mrs. Smith down the road, 6 balls went over the yard, won't be very happy. But it's trying to find that balance, and maybe we're not as good at selling ourselves because we're always trying to just, it's not maybe in the nature, and that's maybe something to consider, and maybe something we can look at moving
I think
forwards.
There's definitely an element, and this is not a criticism clearly, but I think definitely again, people that go into teaching and that kind of caring role don't really have that necessarily that business. I mean, I know you will have to have a business mind, and you've got business manager and stuff at the school now, but that's not necessarily inherent in the people who come into education and into a teaching role. So therefore it is quite different, and plus against resource, right? So you're already doing quite a lot of stuff, and you've got your sustainability and your kids championing all these different projects, to add something else to then like kind of coordinate press and whatever else it might be. It's another resource pressure for you. So, and your resources aren't infinite. Sorry.
It's true. I think no one came into the job, and the headship's a fantastic job, but you are detached, and the office can become kind of a danger if you find yourself in here for too long, having to deal with how do we promote the school, and then how do we sort out reducing our bills, how do we do this, and at the same time really it's how are the children, are we giving them the best deal in the performance, and you have to try and make sure that doesn't get marginalised, and the main thing keeps the main thing.
Yeah, maybe you need to suggest the trust they need a marketing manager, you know.
I'm sure they'll be watching with interest. I'm sure they'll be watching with interest.
So there's also a lot of governance. So on the website, you know, they've got lots of policies on there and to do with safeguarding clearly, which is massively important. Do you find that, again, you know, going back to the resource side, do you find that perhaps there's so much governance that's actually almost a bit of a drain? So you've just said, you know, you can get locked in the office and doing things and just almost forget your role that you came into the education sector for, because you get so tied up in this. Do you think there's too much governance? Do you think it's right governance? Do you think it's right to be so... I mean, obviously the policies are there for a good reason, but does it take a lot to manage that? And therefore, again, does it detract the staff from actually what they want to do, which is care for the children and educate them? Yeah,
I think it's tricky because we kind of live by the policy, and if anything happens, we have to refer to the policy. I think one of the advantages of being in a trust is that a lot of the policies, a lot of that sort of governance and responsibility and the added capacity for finance, for HR, is taken care of. And that has been a huge sort of advantage and certainly helped the workload. We're fortunate at the moment we're able to have a business manager in school. We've never had one before. They are fantastic as well. So that has taken a huge load from me as well, which helps make the focus for me more so on education instead of getting pulled in different directions. I do think it's a really important role, and without our governors, we'd be lost. To do a fantastic voluntary role. It's quite a lot to take on, to read policies, to be aware, to be responsible for some of the safeguarding. They have got the backdrop of the trust behind them now and the training that provides. So I would say governance is important, essential part of education. It's always going to be there, but I think certainly it's been made a lot easier by increasing capacity, and if you can get good people on your governing body, which isn't always easy, then it can make a real difference. Yeah, definitely. And actually you've changed my opinion about trust, because I had a bit of a negative opinion about trust, thinking if a school has to like join a trust, why? Like, what's going to happen? And maybe it's because the school's not very good, but actually it gives you massive amount of resource. You've explained about like the financial side, the governance side. That takes a lot of pressure off you as a school, so therefore you can actually deliver what you want to deliver, as opposed to having to deal with all that yourself as well. I think it'd be fair to say there are lots of different... For the trust, by the way. Yes, nice great switch over. Great for the trust. Not all trusts are the same, and I'm sure that there's different sort of trusts with different sort of prerogatives. And obviously, if the schools are struggling, then sometimes you don't get a choice in which trust you are sort of accepted to join. Fortunately, we're in a position where we could. And that, and for us, it has been a positive. I think most of the schools in the local area now, there's only 9 who aren't in a trust. So for us, it's very much a direction of travel. But we still get that local authority support who view children in this area as being their children, regardless of whether a trust school or a local authority school. So for me, it's been positive. I know that's maybe not always the case, but I think really finding a trust that aligns with your values is the key starting point. It definitely seems to be the best option, doesn't it? And those schools that haven't joined, not to give any state secrets away, but those schools that haven't joined trust, is there are they pushing back on it, or they haven't been invited, or they just don't need it? I think there's a lot of there's still lots of schools who are local authority maintained. There is no sort of direct mandate now to join a trust. There was at one point. There was at one point. That has now changed. So I think it's free choice. I think some people, probably like yourself, think that they will lose some control, and head teachers kind of value the freedoms that they have. I think a lot depends on. We're fortunate in our trust there are schools locally to us, so we can work together geographically. Other trusts may be more wider spread, but we've certainly felt the benefit of that. Not always the case. So I think it's choice from those schools who haven't. I'm sure trusts will be keen to get to sort of grow and make sure that they can continue and increase their capacity. But I think some schools, if there's no need to or they can't see an advantage, are quite happy to have local authority support. Stay fairly independent. So you just mentioned about kind of like collaboration within the trust. So do you find you the schools within the trust that you're in, do you find you come together quite a lot and discuss
what's happening within different schools or challenges you might have. Do you find there's commonalities there as
Yeah.
well?
And,
so you can like help find a joint kind of like way forward with that, I guess.
And that is the strength. And that happens in local authority on a much bigger scale, I would guess, with our trust than a small group of head teachers that come together, but also opportunities for staff to network and share good practice. And this week actually is this month is the Trust Good Practice Month, where staff are visiting other schools within the trust to experience different things that they can offer. So we're holding art workshops, so staff are going to come, do a little bit of art, have a look around, look at our art sort of resources and what we can provide. So lots of good practice sharing, getting staff out, improving their CPD. So that's been a huge strength.
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to kind of my whole ethos of, you know, organisations becoming more responsible, because that's what the trust is doing as well then. It's bringing you together and allowing you to collaborate and, like you say, best practice, which, you know, I was talking at an event last week, and I was talking about best practice, you know, collaborating with businesses and organisations together to make sure you share those best business practices or organisational practices, and, you know, for the better of everyone and the industry and everything else. So I guess that's what they're doing as well. Which has been so lovely to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you enough for your time. I know you're super busy, and I'm sure you'll want to get back to the kids and the school and everything else, whatever you're doing next. Is there anything you would like to obviously say to the viewers and listeners as to promoting the school, or where they can find out more information about you, or inviting to, if you've got any events going on that parents or potential parents could come and visit the school or anything like that?
Yeah, I think just to say that, I mean, anyone's welcome to come and check out Priors Mill.
Right?
Yeah, everyone is welcome. You can find us on the website, Priors Mill Church of England Primary School in Billingham. You can find us also on the Trust website, which is Melrose Learning Trust. I think anyone who wants to get involved or thinks they can help or donate, we're always happy to have volunteers or people come in with suggestions to school. I'm more than happy just to come and get in touch.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's just been great. It's a sort of privileged position to be head teacher, something that can weigh quite heavy at times, but it is a fantastic job. And I would say that I'm sure for all those parents out there that support your local school, whatever it is, support the staff and the teachers. Haven't been in many schools, if any, where people are in education with the sort of power not to make things better. Often working under quite difficult circumstances, I think, at the moment, with the change of government and change of policy. It can be quite an unsettling time, but please support your local school.
Yeah, nice way to end. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for your time. It's been great.
Thank you for listening and watching, and I will see you next time.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Responsible Marketing Podcast. You can contact me with any questions or comments by email at joe@jolonconsulting.com or find me on LinkedIn. All recordings of the podcast can be found on the usual podcast channels, as well as on YouTube if you prefer to watch rather than just listen. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe, which helps the podcast to be found by more people. And of course, feel free to share it on your socials, with your friends and your colleagues. That's it for now. So until next time, thanks for listening.